Stay still, don't scream. Black Virgin saved. Mafia boss, from a setup. A quiet church, candles, then gunfire. A young woman who's never been with anyone drags a bleeding crime boss behind the altar. He covers her body and whispers, "Stay still, don't scream." Now the city thinks she's with him. Cops want her, killers want her more. He hides her in a seaside safe house. One bed, one rule, trust him or die. But there's a twist. The attack wasn't random. Someone inside his own crew wants him dead, and they used her as bait. A letter from her past holds the key. A secret deal could sell her out or save them both. When a rival plans to show her execution to the world, the boss must choose his crown or her life. If love is the only safe place left, will he break his empire to protect her, or is she the trap that finally destroys him? The stained glass cast kaleidoscope shadows across the basilica's marble floor as Imani knelt beside the donation ledgers, her pencil scratching quietly against her notebook. The peace of the night vigil wrapped around her like a shawl, broken only by soft whispers of prayer and flickering candlelight beneath the watchful gaze of the Black Madonna. At 9:47 p.m., the first shot shattered everything. Glass exploded inward in a deadly rainbow shower. Imani's heart stopped, then hammered against her ribs as a man stumbled through the nave, one hand pressed to his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark against his expensive suit. Training and instinct kicked in before fear could paralyze her. She lunged forward, grabbing his arm and yanking him behind the altar rail. "Keep pressure here," she commanded, pressing her silk scarf against his wound. His skin burned fever-hot beneath her hands. Their eyes met in the candlelight. His were storm gray and sharp with pain, but steady. A predator's eyes, even wounded. "Who?" she began, but another shot cracked through the air. He moved with impossible speed, rolling to cover her body with his as marble chips exploded near their heads. "Stay still!" he growled against her ear. "Don't scream!" The fire alarm's shriek pierced the air. She'd pulled it in those first chaotic seconds. "Smart girl," his expression seemed to say. The sound of panicked footsteps and shouting filled the basilica as parishioners fled toward the exits. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Two men burst through the service entrance, weapons drawn. The shorter one laid down covering fire, while the taller one reached them. "Boss," the taller one said tersely, "can you move?" "I'm fine, Alessio." The wounded man, their boss, pushed himself up, keeping one hand pressed to his shoulder. "Get us out." "The girl comes too," said the shorter man, reloading with precise movements. "They filmed her with you, sir. Both sides will be looking for her now." "I have classes," Imani protested. "A faculty meeting tomorrow." "You'll have a bullet in your head if you stay." Alessio cut in. "You're the girl under the altar now. That makes you a target." They hustled her into a sleek black sedan, the wounded boss pressed against her side. She could feel his shallow breathing, smell copper and gunpowder and expensive cologne. The ocean hissed beyond the windows as they wound along coastal roads, streetlights painting Morse code shadows across their faces. The safe house perched on the cliffs like a fortress, all shuttered windows and stark lines against the star-strewn sky. By 11:20 p.m., Imani stood in its kitchen, breathing in lemon oil and cordite. Her phone felt like a bomb in her pocket, one she couldn't risk activating. The shorter man, Gianni, moved around the kitchen with precise efficiency, laying out medical supplies. "Sit," he told his boss quietly. "Let me look at that shoulder." Imani watched as they cut away the ruined suit jacket and shirt. The wound was ugly but clean, through and through. Her scarf had helped slow the bleeding. She looked away as Gianni began cleaning it, focusing instead on the kitchen's details. Gleaming copper pots hanging overhead, knife block on the marble counter, herbs growing in the window box. Almost normal, except for the gun visible beneath Alessio's jacket as he checked the perimeter. "You did well," the boss, Cassian, she'd heard them call him, said suddenly. His voice was rough with pain but clear. "Quick thinking with the alarm, saved lives." "I'm good in a crisis," she said. "Less good at being kidnapped." "Not kidnapped. Protected." He met her eyes. "There's a difference." "Is there?" She wrapped her arms around herself, the events of the night finally starting to sink in. "I don't even know who was shooting at you, or why I can't go home." "The why doesn't matter right now," Alessio said from the doorway. "What matters is staying alive until we sort this out." "And my thesis? My life?" "Will still be there," Cassian said quietly. "But only if you're alive to return to it." Imani looked around the kitchen, at these dangerous men who'd swept her into their world of violence and shadows, at the medical supplies and weapons that spoke of preparation for nights exactly like this one. The wind rattled the shutters, and somewhere in the distance, waves crashed against the cliffs. She was trapped here, at least for tonight, in this strange liminal space between her normal life and whatever darkness had erupted in the basilica. "Fine," she said finally. "But I want answers. Soon." Cassian nodded once, then winced as Gianni began stitching his shoulder. "Fair enough. For now, though, you should rest. Gianni will show you to a room once he's finished here." She could feel the weight of secrets and unspoken dangers pressing in around them. But she was alive, and so was he, the man she'd saved without thinking, who'd then shielded her with his own body. Whatever came next would have to wait until morning. The kitchen clock ticked past 11:30 p.m. as Gianni worked, the smell of antiseptic mixing with lemon oil and sea air. Outside, the night pressed against the shuttered windows like a living thing, full of threats and watching eyes. But in here, for now, they were safe. 4 people bound together by violence and necessity, waiting for dawn. The kitchen gleamed under harsh fluorescence as Gianni methodically disinfected every surface, his movements precise and practiced. Across the room, Alessio swept electronic detection equipment along baseboards and light fixtures, checking for surveillance devices. The air smelled of bleach and antiseptic, masking the lingering scent of gunpowder. At the heavy oak table, Imani carefully unwrapped Cassian's makeshift bandage, her own silk scarf now ruined with blood. "I'm going to clean this again," she said clearly, keeping her voice steady. "The saline might sting." Cassian's jaw tightened, but he gave a short nod. His skin was too pale, making the tattoos on his forearms stand out starkly. "Keep talking to him," Gianni instructed without looking up from his cleaning. "We need him alert until the blood loss stabilizes." "I'm right here," Cassian growled, but his words lacked heat. Imani dampened a fresh dish towel with saline. "This is going to be cold. Deep breath." She began dabbing around the wound, narrating each movement. "I'm starting at the edges, working inward. The bleeding has slowed significantly. Entry wound is clean, no fabric trapped inside." "You sound experienced," Alessio commented, testing a window frame. "First aid certification, required for my research trips." She kept her touch gentle but firm. "Plus, I've patched up enough scraped knees on my little cousins." "Different skill set entirely," Cassian murmured, but his lips curved slightly. "Same principles. Clean it, dress it, distract the patient." She pressed a fresh gauze pad against the wound. "Hold this here." He complied, his fingers brushing hers. Despite everything, her skin tingled at the contact. "Sir," Alessio approached the table. "All business now. We need to classify her status. For protocols." "Asset," Cassian said immediately. "Full protection detail until we identify the shooters and their employers." "I'm right here," Imani snapped, echoing his earlier words. "And I'm a person, not an asset or a chess piece or leverage." "A person who saved my life," Cassian acknowledged, "which makes you valuable and vulnerable." He shrugged out of his ruined jacket with a grimace, and something caught the light. Around his neck, half hidden by his collar, hung an old rosary. The pendant was instantly familiar, a perfect miniature of the Black Madonna from the Basilica, the same icon she'd been studying when the shots rang out. Something shifted in her chest at this glimpse of faith beneath the violence. "The guest room is ready," Gianni announced, breaking the moment. "There is no guest room," Alessio corrected. "This is a bolt hole, remember? 1 bedroom, basic supplies." Cassian's expression hardened. "Give her the bedroom, I'll take watch." "You need proper rest," Gianni started. "I need to ensure our security." Cassian's tone left no room for argument. "Show her the room. I'll take the chair by the door." The bedroom was sparse, but clean. Just a queen bed, with navy blankets and a small lamp. Cassian followed her in, moving stiffly, and settled into a high-backed chair near the door. He positioned his gun across his thigh, the metal gleaming dully. "The rules are simple," he said. "Do not open the windows. Do not answer any calls from numbers you don't recognize. Do not look out toward the road." His eyes met hers. "These aren't restrictions. They're survival tactics." "I need to contact my department," she said. "They'll raise alarms if I miss tomorrow's meeting." He nodded to Alessio, who produced a sleek phone. "Untraceable. Make it brief." Imani's fingers hovered over the keypad. Finally, she typed, Family emergency, have to fly home tonight. We'll email documentation. Deeply sorry for the short notice. The lie felt bitter, but better than the truth. Better than dead. Good, Cassian said when she handed the phone back. Short, plausible, no details they can check immediately. I hate lying. Lying keeps people alive sometimes. He shifted in the chair, checking the window's reflection in a small mirror he'd positioned. Get some rest. The bedside clock read 1:15 a.m. when the rain started, pattering against the sealed shutters. Imani lay fully clothed on top of the covers, listening to the storm and Cassian's steady breathing. She knew he was only pretending to sleep, maintaining his guard even while appearing relaxed. Her mind raced through the events that had led her here, the crack of gunfire through stained glass, the weight of a bleeding stranger against her, the rush of adrenaline as she pulled the fire alarm. Now she was caught in their world, classified as an asset by men who dealt in violence and power. But she would not be passive, would not let them, or their enemies, decide her fate. The world might think it owned her now, might try to reduce her to a piece on their game board, but she had survived by her own wit and will in that basilica. She would survive this too, on her own terms. Rain drummed harder against the shutters. In his chair, Cassian shifted slightly, the gun never wavering from its ready position. Imani closed her eyes but didn't sleep, mind working through scenarios and possibilities. She might be trapped here for now, but her brain was free to plan, to analyze, to prepare. The storm gathered strength outside, wind driving sheets of rain against the house's sturdy walls. Inside, the air hummed with unspoken tensions and possibilities. Cassian guarded the door while Alessio and Gianni patrolled the perimeter, and Imani lay awake, every sense alert, already gathering intelligence about these men who thought they controlled her fate. They would learn. She was not an asset to be protected or leveraged. She was a force to be reckoned with, and when the time came to act, she would be ready. The morning sun crept through the shutters' slats as Imani counted cans in the safe house pantry. 6:40 a.m. Too early to be this exhausted. Coffee dripped steadily into the pot while she tallied their supplies. Pasta, sauce, beans, rice. Enough for a week if they rationed carefully. The kitchen smelled like old coffee grounds and yesterday's gunpowder. Heavy footsteps made her turn. Cassian stood in the doorway, stubble darkening his jaw, favoring his left side. His shirt was unbuttoned, revealing fresh blood seeping through last night's bandages. Show me, he said quietly. What you did with the tourniquet. I need to clean it properly. Imani gathered supplies from the first aid kit. Antiseptic, gauze, surgical thread. She laid them out methodically on the kitchen table, muscle memory from her first aid certification taking over. Sit, she instructed, and take off the old bandage slowly. He complied without argument, revealing the angry wound beneath. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the antiseptic. Let me. She stepped closer, the morning quiet settling around them like dust. His breath whispered against her wrist as she cleaned the wound. The bullet grazed deep but didn't lodge. You'll need stitches. I can manage. Your hands are shaking, she threaded the curved needle. I'll guide you through it. He paused, then nodded once. Tell me what to do. She demonstrated the proper suture technique on a piece of gauze. Small, even stitches, not too tight or it won't heal right. His fingers brushed her shirt cuff, then stopped. May I? He asked, reaching to fold back the fabric. Yes. The word hung between them, a boundary acknowledged, a baseline set. They worked in charged silence, her hands steady as she guided his movements, the kitchen filled with pale morning light and the scent of coffee, almost normal if not for the gun still visible at his hip. The front door clicked. Alessio strode in, holding up a burner phone. Got the street cam footage. You need to see this. The grainy video showed the basilica's front steps. There, Imani half-carrying Cassian behind the altar, her face clear in the security lights. More footage followed. Different angles, different cameras, all showing her involvement. Check the voicemail, Alessio said, passing her another phone. Her old number's inbox was full. Most messages were garbled threats, but one stood out. A calm voice, speaking her name like a promise of violence. Whoever planned this, Cassian explained, buttoning his shirt carefully over fresh bandages, expected me to die in the basilica. It's an insult. A Catholic boss gunned down in sacred space. They're using rumor as a weapon, and now you're part of the story. Then we tell the police what really happened, Imani insisted. I saw the shooters. I can identify. They'll claim you're my accomplice, Cassian cut in. The footage shows you helping me. To the police, that makes you either a willing conspirator or a hostage. Either way, rival crews will hunt you whether you talk or not. Alessio handed her the burner phone again. On the screen, a paused frame showed her face illuminated by streetlights as she pulled Cassian to safety. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m., less than 12 hours ago. In that frozen moment, she could see her old life slipping away. The clock on the wall ticked to 9:10 a.m. Her faculty meeting was starting right now, her empty chair speaking volumes. No explanation would suffice. No quick return was possible. She stared at her own face in the grainy footage, understanding sinking in like lead in her stomach. She couldn't go back, not today, not tomorrow, not until they eliminated whoever had orchestrated the hit. Her world had narrowed to this safe house, these men, this deadly game she'd been drafted into by one moment of mercy. The coffee pot beeped, startlingly ordinary. Imani poured 3 cups mechanically, her mind racing through options that all led to dead ends. The morning sun painted stark shadows across the kitchen floor, while steam rose from the mugs like smoke signals no one could read. We need to move soon, Alessio said, checking his phone. This location won't stay secure for long. Cassian nodded, then winced at the movement. Start the preparations. We'll leave at nightfall. Imani wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, letting the heat ground her. The familiar comfort of academia, her research, her thesis, her carefully planned future, felt like a dream she'd woken from. Reality was here, in the medical supplies scattered across the table, in the weight of watching eyes through every window, in the way Cassian moved with calculated precision despite his injury. She caught her reflection in the kitchen window. Same face as the security footage. But her eyes were different now. Harder, more aware. The woman who had bent over ancient texts and donation ledgers seemed like a stranger. That woman hadn't known how to dress bullet wounds or recognize the sound of a safety clicking off, or understand that sometimes survival meant becoming someone new. The burner phone's screen had gone dark, but her captured image remained burned in her mind. That was the moment, helping a bleeding stranger behind an altar, when her choices had narrowed to one path. Now she had to walk it, wherever it led. The morning stretched around them, deceptively peaceful. Alessio made quiet calls from the corner, while Cassian studied building blueprints. Imani sipped her cooling coffee, each mundane action underlaid with tension, with waiting, with the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone was hunting them all. The dining room transformed into a war room at 11 sharp. Alessio spread papers across the polished wood while sunlight striped through the closed blinds. Phone records, timestamps, and surveillance photos created a spider's web of connections. Listen to this, Alessio said, pressing play on a recorder. A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. Clip the king during benediction. The art girl who catalogs the candles will be there alone. Use her presence. Imani's stomach lurched. They'd been watching her, using her routine as part of their trap. Her fingers curled around the chair's edge until her knuckles went white. Cassian's jaw locked, a muscle twitching beneath the skin. Play it again. The second time, she watched his face. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by something darker. Salvatore, he said, the name like poison on his tongue. Those are his phrases. He controls the phone drops near the churches. Your consigliere? Alessio asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Former consigliere, Cassian corrected. His wound made him move carefully as he stood, but rage gave him energy. If he's turned, this house isn't safe. We need to confirm. How? Imani asked. We test it. Cassian nodded to Alessio. Seed a fake message through the Riverside channel, something that would interest him. Say I'm meeting with the Bratva tonight. Alessio worked his phone while Gianni appeared with fresh coffee, his presence quiet but attentive. The kitchen clock ticked past noon, then 1. They waited. At 2:15, Alessio's burner buzzed. Message leaked, exactly as planted, through Salvatore's network. Why? Imani demanded, facing Cassian. What makes a trusted advisor turn? He met her gaze without flinching. Money, control of the southern shipping routes, and style points. Having me gunned down during Mass sends a message about divine justice. Salvatore always did love his theater. And me, I'm just collateral damage? Your leverage, he said. A civilian witness they can threaten or eliminate to control the narrative. She pushed back from the table. I refuse to be baggage in this game. We need a plan. A real one. We have. No. She cut him off. We need a checklist. Clear steps. First, we move locations before dark. Second, we restock medical supplies because that shoulder needs watching. Third, she took a breath. I need to get something from my storage locker. Cassian's expression hardened. Too risky. It's a letter, she said. From my father, before he died. It's all I have left of him, and it's locked away safe. I'm not leaving it behind for them to find. The room went quiet. Even Alessio stopped typing. Cassian studied her, measuring determination against danger. We control the approach. You follow my lead exactly. No arguments. She nodded once. Agreed. The afternoon blurred into motion. Gianni methodically stripped the house, removing every trace of their presence. Medical supplies, shell casings, even cleaning wipes disappeared into bags. Alessio coordinated with contacts, arranging fuel drops and alternate routes. Imani packed her borrowed clothes into a small duffel, trying not to think about her apartment, her books, her carefully built life now beyond reach. The sound of waves crashed against the cliffs outside, a constant reminder of how isolated they were. At 4:30, shadows lengthened across the floors. Alessio worked on a second car in the garage while Gianni did a final sweep. The house felt hollow, a shell about to be abandoned. Cassian appeared in her doorway, filling the frame with his presence. The evening light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, the day's stubble on his jaw. His injured shoulder made his stance slightly uneven, but it didn't diminish his authority. We leave at sunset, he said, voice low and certain. Stay by me. The wind cut off the ocean, sharp and salt-laden, rattling the windows like warning chimes. Imani shouldered her bag, feeling the weight of everything that had changed in 24 hours. In the kitchen, Gianni packed the last of the medical supplies, while Alessio reviewed escape routes. The safe house would be empty within the hour, all evidence of their presence erased except for the lingering scent of coffee and gun oil. Imani checked her borrowed phone one last time. No new threats, no messages from her old life. Just the ticking clock and the growing shadows and the knowledge that somewhere in the city, Salvatore was waiting for confirmation of Cassian's death. The sun sank lower, painting the walls in amber and blood red. Soon they would slip away into the gathering dark, racing against betrayal and time. But first they had to navigate the dangerous space between sunset and safety, between this refuge and the next. Cassian checked his weapon with practiced motions, the metal catching the dying light. His eyes met hers across the room, a silent question and answer passing between them. They were in this together now, bound by bullets and betrayal, and the choice she'd made behind that altar. The wind keened louder, pressure dropping as storm clouds gathered offshore. Nature itself seemed to sense the coming violence, the inevitable collision of loyalty and betrayal, power and survival. In the garage, engines hummed to life. Gianni finished his final checklist while Alessio confirmed their route. Everything was ready, balanced on the knife edge of departure. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when they left the cliff house, casting long shadows across the winding coastal road. 2 cars pulled away at precisely 6:05 p.m. A black sedan and a gray SUV, both unremarkable in the fading light. Under a rusted railway bridge, they paused just long enough to swap license plates. Gianni worked with practiced efficiency, his latex-gloved hands moving quickly while Alessio kept watch. In the sedan, Imani sat low in her seat, a navy baseball cap pulled down over her face, dark-tinted glasses hiding her eyes. Beside her, Cassian's presence was a solid wall of contained violence. The storage facility squatted near the docks, a maze of corrugated metal units surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire, salt air mixed with diesel fumes as they pulled into the mostly empty lot. A single security camera swept the entrance, its red light blinking steadily. "Stay close," Cassian murmured as they left the car. He positioned himself between Imani and the street, his injured shoulder stiff but his movements fluid. The facility's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making every corner look deeper, more threatening. Unit 31B was halfway down a dimly lit hall. Imani's hands trembled slightly as she worked the key, but the lock clicked open smoothly. Inside, cardboard boxes lined metal shelves, her life compressed into neat labeled containers. She went straight for a slim lockbox tucked behind some textbooks, then grabbed a shoebox of family photos on impulse. The weight of memories in her hands made her throat tight. The attack came without warning. 3 men in black masks burst through the hallway door, weapons raised. But Cassian was faster, devastatingly so. He moved like violence given form, like a door slamming shut on hope of survival. 2 shots cracked in the confined space, deafening. A knife flashed. Bodies hit concrete with meaty thuds. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds. One attacker still groaned, his pistol skittering across the floor. Imani kicked it away before it could be grabbed, her body moving on instinct, while her mind tried to process the sudden explosion of violence. "Fourth man!" she called, spotting a shadow's reflection in the metal door. "Behind us!" Cassian spun, shoving her behind him as more shots rang out. They sprinted for the exit, alarms suddenly screaming through the building. The sound followed them into the parking lot where Alessio already had the engine running. They peeled out as police sirens began wailing in the distance. Imani clutched her recovered treasures to her chest, feeling her heart hammer against the metal box. She didn't look back to see if they were being followed. The new safe house was an apartment above an old bakery, its windows dark and shuttered. The space smelled of stale yeast and dust. Gianni immediately began checking the gas lines and utilities while Alessio secured the perimeter. Imani sat at a scarred kitchen table, the lockbox in front of her. Her hands weren't quite steady as she traced the edges of the metal container. Inside was her father's last letter, written before his death, before she understood why he'd been so paranoid about locks and security cameras. Cassian took a seat nearby, close enough to reach but not crowding her space. His gun rested on the table, a dark reminder of the evening's violence, but his presence felt oddly steadying, like a harbor wall against rough seas. The kitchen timer dinged, Yanni testing the old oven, and Imani jumped slightly. The domestic sound seemed surreal after the brutal efficiency of Cassian's violence at the storage unit. She could still hear the impact of bodies hitting concrete, still smell cordite and copper. Her thumbnail finally slipped under the letter's seal at 8:40 p.m. The paper was thick, expensive. Her father had always appreciated quality stationery. The oven timer chimed again, a cheerful counterpoint to the weight of secrets about to be revealed. The apartment was quiet except for Gianni's methodical movements and the distant sound of traffic. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm, unaware of the bloodshed and betrayal playing out in its shadows. Inside, Imani held her breath as she began to unfold the letter. "Take your time," Cassian said softly, his first words since they'd arrived. His voice was gentle, at odds with the deadly grace he'd displayed earlier. "We're secure here." Imani nodded, fingers tracing the edge of the paper. The letter represented more than just her father's last words. It was a connection to her past, to the man who'd taught her to be cautious, to notice details, to trust her instincts. The same instincts that had led her to help a wounded stranger in a church, changing her life forever. The kitchen's fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the table. Gianni continued his careful inspection of the apartment's utilities, his quiet competence a reminder that they weren't completely alone in this. Somewhere in the city, Salvatore's men were probably already cleaning up the bodies at the storage facility, erasing evidence of the failed ambush. But here, in this temporary sanctuary, time seemed suspended between one breath and the next, between the life she'd had and whatever awaited her once she read her father's words. The oven timer dinged one final time, marking the moment like a punctuation mark in the strange story her life had become. Imani's hands trembled as she unfolded her father's letter. The paper crackled in the quiet kitchen, each crease revealing neat, precise handwriting. Her father's final confession spilled across the pages in black ink. "I never wanted this life for you," the letter began. The words blurred as she read about her father's involvement with a Bratva money laundering operation years ago. He'd been their accountant, cleaning dirty money through art acquisitions and church donations, until his conscience broke. She could almost hear his voice as she read, "I testified anonymously, thought I'd buried it deep enough to keep you safe. But there's a new player now, Kirill Sokolov. If he ever connects us to that testimony, he'll want blood." Cassian leaned forward when she gasped, finding a photocopy tucked into the letter's fold. It was a wire transfer log showing art donations routed through the same basilica where she'd found him bleeding last night. "Here," she said, spreading everything on the table. The donation patterns match. Same amounts, same routing. Cassian studied the documents, his jaw tightening. Kirill's working with Salvatore. The church hit wasn't just about territory. It was theater. A public execution in sacred space to break faith, in my protection, and they used your research schedule to time it. "They wanted to flush out my father's family while destroying you," Imani said, the pieces clicking into horrible place. "2 victories for the price of 1 bullet. The plan failed because of you," Cassian said quietly, not as a burden, as the variable they didn't expect. "Your courage under that altar changed everything." Imani met his gaze, seeing respect there instead of calculation. The silence between them felt different now, charged with shared understanding rather than suspicion. He stood abruptly. "Come with me. If they're hunting both of us, you need proper training." The bakery's back room was cleared of old equipment, leaving space to move. Cassian positioned her along the wall, teaching her to listen for footsteps, to feel vibrations through plaster, to distinguish threat from ambient noise. "Stay close to solid surfaces," he instructed. "They provide cover and conduct sound." His hand brushed her shoulder, adjusting her stance. "Keep your center of gravity low." When he handed her the handgun, his movements were precise and clinical. "Fingers straight until you're ready to fire. Feel the weight. Learn the safety like it's part of your hand." Imani absorbed everything with sharp focus, mimicking his grip demonstrations until they felt natural. She caught him nodding approval like she was one of his men. "I'm not your soldier," she said firmly. His expression shifted, softened. "No, you're not." He stepped closer, showing her how to sight along the barrel. His hands were rock steady now as they guided hers, though she'd seen them shake earlier when he'd cleaned his wound. "Breath control affects accuracy," he murmured, his chest barely touching her back. "Exhale as you squeeze." Time dissolved into practical lessons: stance, grip, breathing. Imani found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it, fear transforming into focused competence. She didn't miss how Cassian's instruction grew less formal, more attuned to her responses. The screech of tires outside shattered their concentration. A patrol car rolled past, slower than normal traffic. Cassian went still, listening. Imani's hand tightened on the gun. 10 minutes crawled by in tense silence. Then, a whisper of sound from the back door. A scratch of metal on metal. "3 of them!" Cassian breathed, moving like a shadow. "Remember what I taught you?" The first 2 attackers died before they cleared the stairs, Cassian's blade and bullet finding vital points with surgical precision. The 3rd man charged forward, but Imani was ready. She whipped the heavy, thurible chain she'd kept from the church donations, the one she'd been cataloging before everything changed. It tangled the attacker's legs as he hit the landing. His head cracked against the steps with a dull thud. Suddenly it was over. They stood in the stairwell, breathing hard, surrounded by aftermath. The adrenaline surge was dizzying. Imani found herself staring at Cassian, his lethal grace still thrumming through the air between them. He moved first, closing the distance. His hand cupped her face with impossible gentleness, at odds with the violence still staining his knuckles. When he kissed her, it felt like falling into fire, consuming and bright and dangerous. She kissed him back with equal intensity, tasting copper and gunpowder and need. But fear still lurked beneath her skin, making her hands shake where they gripped his shirt. "I want to want this without fear," she whispered against his mouth, his forehead pressed to hers, breath uneven. "Then we wait until it's yours." They stayed there in the dark stairwell, hearts pounding in sync as the clock on the wall ticked past midnight into a new day. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Another crime, another crisis in a city that never slept. But in this moment, suspended between violence and tenderness, they held on to the simple truth of survival. Blood slowly cooled on the concrete steps. Cassian's gun was warm against his hip where Imani's hand rested. The thurible chain glinted dully in the emergency lights. A reminder that sacred things could become weapons when necessary, and sometimes weapons could become sanctuary. Alessio worked with brutal efficiency in the stairwell, wrapping bodies in contractor bags, while Yanni's bleach-soaked rag erased any trace of the fight. The sharp chemical smell cut through lingering gunpowder, making Imani's eyes water as she sat at the flour-dusted prep table, spreading her father's photocopied documents under the yellow kitchen light. Cassian leaned close, his shoulder brushing hers as they sorted through dates and account numbers. His presence felt different after their kiss, charged but controlled, like a live wire carefully insulated. "Here," Imani pointed to a recurring entry. "These transfers all route through St. Anthony's maritime mission." "Still active," Cassian confirmed, tapping a recent newspaper clipping about the charity's harborfront soup kitchen. "Perfect cover for moving cash. Who questions donations to feed the homeless?" Their fingers brushed as they aligned timeline pages. Imani noticed Cassian didn't pull away, letting the contact linger. His hand was warm despite the night's chill. "The pattern matches," she said, tracing transaction dates. "My father's old route is being used again, but the amounts are larger, way larger." "Salvatore controls most church-adjacent operations," Cassian's voice held carefully banked fury. He would know about your father's old channels. Using them again is almost poetic, if you appreciate that kind of cruel symmetry. Gianni appeared in the doorway, rubber gloves dripping. Sight's clean, but we shouldn't push our luck here. Agreed. Cassian checked his watch, 12:45 a.m. We ghost by sunrise, but first we need to confirm who's watching that charity office. Daytime surveillance? Alessio asked, washing blood from under his nails. A drop. Make it look routine, draw them out. Imani gathered the papers, mind racing. I can help. They won't expect to see me in broad daylight. Cassian studied her for a long moment. You've already proven yourself capable, but this is voluntary. You can stay back. I'm already in this. Might as well be useful. He nodded once, respect evident. We move at first light. For now, we rest in shifts, 90 minutes each. The couch was narrow but clean. Imani settled onto it while Cassian took the chair beside her, positioning himself between her and the door. His gun rested across his thigh, but his free hand lay palm up on the armrest, an offer without pressure. The adrenaline crash hit hard. Imani felt the weight of the past 24 hours pressing down. Before sleep claimed her, she reached out, letting her fingers tangle with his for just a moment. His hand tightened gently before releasing her. At 6:15 a.m., they descended the delivery stairs in pre-dawn silence. The harbor air was thick with salt and diesel as they positioned the surveillance van 3 blocks from St. Anthony's. Imani pulled up the hood of her borrowed sweatshirt, camera ready. Watch for patterns, Cassian instructed. Delivery times, regular faces, anything that feels rehearsed. The morning crowd built slowly. Dock workers, early mass attendees, homeless men lining up for breakfast. Imani photographed it all, focusing on the charity's back entrance. At 7:40 a.m., a familiar black sedan pulled into the alley. There, she whispered, zooming in as a heavy-set man in a driver's uniform carried a leather satchel inside. I've seen him before, at the Basilica. He's Salvatore's driver. Cassian's jaw clenched as he examined the photos. Marco, Salvatore's most trusted courier. This is our proof. The betrayal sat heavy in the van's close air. Imani could almost taste Cassian's controlled rage, see it in the tight line of his shoulders. They tracked 3 more deliveries before pulling out. The boutique hotel's underground garage was cool and dim as they parked at 8 a.m. Before shutting off the engine, Cassian spoke with quiet intensity. Tonight, this ends. The snake loses its head. Imani studied his profile in the dim light, seeing both the killer and the man who'd offered his hand in the darkness. Both were equally real, equally true. The thought should have frightened her more than it did. The garage's ventilation hummed, stirring dust motes in the weak fluorescent light. Somewhere above, the hotel was coming alive with the morning rush, tourists and business travelers moving through their normal lives, unaware of the currents of violence and vengeance flowing beneath the surface of their world. Cassian checked his phone, scanning messages from his network of informants. His wounded shoulder was stiff. Imani could tell from the careful way he moved, but his hands were steady. The night's kiss lingered between them, unspoken but present like a shared secret or a promise waiting to be kept. They had proof now. The next move would be decisive. As they gathered their surveillance gear and prepared to head up to their temporary sanctuary, Imani felt the weight of what was coming. Not fear exactly, but awareness of consequence, of choice, of the way paths could narrow to a single point of no return. The elevator hummed to life, ready to carry them up into another day of calculated risks and necessary violence. Another day of choosing who to trust and how much of their souls to risk in the process. The doors slid open with a soft chime, inviting them into the next https docs.google.com document.d 18xq l d36 yotg pyb qq hcg bagq6 nnlg edit usp cache sharing of their dangerous dance. The hotel suite's shower sputtered to life at 10:30 a.m. Imani stepped under the spray, fully dressed, her borrowed hoodie heavy with last night's gunpowder residue. She watched gray water swirl down the drain, the practical solution of a girl who'd grown up making do. The fabric clung to her skin, suddenly heavier as it soaked through. But she didn't mind. This wasn't her first time washing clothes while wearing them, just the first time she'd done it after being involved in a gunfight. Through the bathroom's frosted glass, Cassian caught the outline of her figure. Small, determined, efficient. Something in his chest tightened at the sight. It wasn't the raw desire he'd felt during their kiss, but a deeper ache. She'd maintained her humanity despite everything. The simple act of showering in her clothes to salvage them cracked his carefully maintained walls. He lingered there longer than necessary, watching her shadow move behind the glass, struck by how such a practical action could feel so intimate. The water ran clear eventually. Imani scrubbed at spots on the sleeves where residue had settled into the fibers. Her movements were methodical, almost meditative, as if cleaning away the evidence of violence might also wash away the memory of it. When she emerged in fresh clothes from her storage unit, hair wrapped in a hotel towel, room service had arrived. They sat at the suite's small table, picking at eggs and planning their next move. Steam rose from the coffee cups between them, forming a fragile barrier neither seemed eager to disturb. Salvatore can't resist insider intelligence, Cassian explained, pushing toast across the plate. His fingers left indents in the bread's soft surface. Especially about sacred spaces. We'll feed him coordinates for the old monastery crypt. It's perfect for a supposed meet. The place has limited escape routes, which works in our favor. While you set that up, I'll back up our evidence. Imani pulled out 3 USB drives, laying them on the table like chess pieces. Her nails tapped against the plastic cases, a nervous habit she couldn't quite control. The driver photos and voice recording need to be saved separately. Insurance, in case anything happens to our phones. I don't trust digital-only backups, not with what we know now. He nodded, watching her methodical preparations. She approached survival like research, thorough, leaving no detail unchecked. The way her brow furrowed slightly as she labeled each drive reminded him of scholars he'd seen in university libraries. Years ago, before his life narrowed to power and blood. The lull that followed felt strangely domestic. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains as they cleared plates, their movements falling into an unexpected rhythm. The clink of silverware and soft rustle of napkins created a soundtrack of normalcy neither had expected to find. Perhaps it was the false sense of safety, or maybe just exhaustion, but Cassian found himself talking. I was 16, he said quietly, staring at his coffee. The dark liquid reflected his face in fragments. The first time I killed someone. He was hurting my sister, Elena. I found them behind our building. She was screaming. Her blouse was torn, and there was blood on her lip. I still remember the sound she made. Not quite crying. Something worse. Imani set down her cup, listening without interrupting. Her eyes never left his face, steady and present in a way few people had ever been with him. I had a knife, carried it for protection in that neighborhood. Didn't think, just acted. He bled out in 3 minutes. His voice remained steady, but shame colored the edges. His fingers curled around the cup handle tight enough to whiten his knuckles. The local priest said God would forgive me, used the same tone when blessing hitmen's guns. That's when I learned how faith gets twisted, how easily mercy becomes an excuse for violence. Did Elena recover? Imani's question was soft but direct, cutting through his memories. Eventually, moved to France, has kids now, 2 boys and a girl. I make sure they're protected, but from a distance. This life, he gestured at the room, the guns hidden in drawer holsters, the burner phones lined up on the nightstand. It spreads like poison, touches everyone close to you, whether you want it to or not. I see her once a year, always somewhere public, always with security sweeps beforehand. You were protecting someone you loved, Imani said carefully. She reached across the table, but stopped short of touching him. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. There's a difference between killing because you have to and killing because you want to. Their eyes met across the table. She wasn't offering absolution. They both knew better, but understanding. She saw the scared boy who'd become a man built from sharp edges and necessity. For a moment, Cassian felt transparent, as if all his carefully constructed barriers had turned to glass. The afternoon light softened as they worked. Cassian made calls through cutouts, laying the groundwork for their trap. His voice changed slightly with each call, harder, smoother, whatever the contact needed to hear. Imani encrypted the photo files, occasionally asking technical questions that made him almost smile. Her laptop screen cast a blue glow across her face as she built digital fortifications around their evidence. Outside, the city continued its endless pulse. Car horns, distant sirens, the murmur of pedestrians, 17 floors below. All of it seemed to belong to another world entirely. At 6:45 p.m., they seeded the crypt location through a carefully chosen channel, a former altar boy now working as a bartender at Salvatore's favorite restaurant. 30 minutes later, Alessio's text confirmed success. Salvatore's phone had pinged near the planted intel. He took the bait, Cassian said, setting down his phone. Relief and tension battled in his voice. Now we wait. Alessio has eyes on the perimeter of the crypt. If Salvatore makes any moves tonight, we'll know. The sunset painted the room in bruised purples and deep blues. Light caught on the edge of a water glass, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the table. Perhaps it was the fading light, or the knowledge that tomorrow would bring violence, but something shifted in the air between them. The quiet felt different, charged with possibility. Cassian moved first, reaching to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers hovered for a heartbeat before making contact. Imani leaned into the touch, eyes steady on his. There was no fear there, only clear decision. Yes, he whispered, the word both question and promise. Yes. Her answer was equally soft but unwavering. The kiss was different from their first, slower, deliberate. His hands framed her face while hers gripped his shirt, fingers curling into the fabric as if anchoring herself. There was hunger there, but also tenderness. Each touch came with a whispered check, each response clear and willing. The patient care in his movements made her chest ache with a feeling she couldn't name. When his mouth found her neck, she gasped, her fingers threaded through his hair as he pressed her gently against the wall. The cool surface against her back contrasted with the heat of his body against her front. Heat built between them, sweet and inevitable, like something they'd been circling toward since that first meeting in the archives. Is this okay? He murmured against her skin, his breath warm and unsteady. More than okay, she breathed, tilting her head to give him better access. Don't stop. His hand had just slipped under her shirt, tracing the curve of her waist when the loudspeakers crackled to life outside. The harsh electronic sound shattered the moment like glass. Attention occupants of Suite 704. This is the police. We have a warrant for this location. Exit with your hands visible. You have 60 seconds to comply. They froze, hearts pounding against each other's chests. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway, the unmistakable sound of tactical teams taking position. Through the door, they could hear the metallic click of weapons being readied. Service stairs, Cassian said, already moving. His expression shifted from lover to tactician in an instant. Now, grab only what we need. Imani grabbed their phones while he collected weapons. They could hear officers coordinating positions through the door, voices clipped and professional. A radio squawked, followed by a response too muffled to make out. Alessio's voice crackled through their earpieces. Fire alarm triggered on 3. That'll split their manpower. East stairwell's clear. I've got the car running 2 blocks south. Move fast, boss. Cassian took Imani's hand, his grip firm but not crushing. His eyes searched hers, no longer tender but focused, intent. Trust me? She squeezed back once. Lead the way. The service door clicked shut behind them just as the main entrance burst open. In the narrow corridor, Cassian pulled her close, his breath warm against her ear. The space smelled of cleaning supplies and dust, illuminated only by emergency lighting that cast long shadows. I'll explain everything once we're clear. Stay with me. Step where I step. And if I say drop, you drop immediately. Understood? She nodded against his shoulder, feeling the outline of his holster beneath his jacket. The fire alarm wailed through the building as they descended into gathering darkness, leaving the ruins of their almost moment behind. Emergency lights flashed red at each landing, painting their faces in crimson pulses. It was 8:12 p.m., and the night was just beginning. The service stairs echoed with their footsteps as they descended at 8:13 p.m., the fire alarm's wail covering their escape. Cassian kept one hand on Imani's lower back, guiding her through the dim emergency lighting while his other hand gripped his weapon. They burst through the loading dock's metal door into the cool night air. A dark sedan idled in the shadows, engine purring. Cassian opened the rear door, scanning the perimeter. As Imani slid inside, he followed, and the car merged smoothly into traffic. Report! Cassian demanded into his earpiece. Alessio's voice crackled back. Warrant's legitimate, but here's the kick. Tip came through one of our internal lines. Limited access, boss. Maybe 5 people could have done it. Salvatore, Cassian growled, his jaw tight, his hand clenched on his thigh, knuckles white. He's painting the girl as your accomplice, Alessio continued. They've got her name, photo, everything, and our street guys spotted Kirill's crew hanging around the precinct. Imani stared out the window, her reflection pale in the glass. Police lights flashed in the distance, and she sank lower in her seat. Cassian's voice turned to ice. Set up a false handoff. Leak that I'm willing to trade her location at midnight. The crypt. Say I want safe passage for my crew in exchange. The words hit Imani like a physical blow. Trade her location? Her fingers twisted in her lap, but she kept silent, watching the city blur past. The man who'd kissed her so tenderly an hour ago was now discussing her like a bargaining chip. What Imani couldn't hear was Alessio's response about the collapsed tunnel they'd used to get a kill team in early. Cassian kept his replies clipped and coded, not wanting to reveal the full plan over potentially compromised comms. He'd explain everything once they were secure. They switched cars twice more, zigzagging through the city. Imani's silence grew heavier with each mile. The tenderness they'd shared in the hotel room felt like a dream now, shattered by the cold reality of his world. At 10:05 p.m., they pulled up to a warehouse near the waterfront. Cassian touched her shoulder briefly. "Stay in the car. I need to check the crypt's secondary entrance with Alessio. Won't be long." She watched him climb the fire escape to the roof, his figure dark against the night sky. The driver stepped away to smoke, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the echo of Cassian's words about trading her location. Her hand found the door handle. The street was empty, quiet except for distant dock work and the lap of waves. The basilica wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes on foot. Father Marcus would be there for evening prayers. He'd help her, give her sanctuary until she could figure out her next move. She slipped out silently, her shoes barely making a sound on the damp pavement. In her pocket, she found a crumpled receipt and a pen. Her hands shook as she wrote, "I won't be currency." The note looked stark and small on the car seat. Part of her wanted to wait, to let him explain. But the memory of his cold voice discussing the trade ate at her. She'd promised herself she wouldn't be passive in a world that thought it owned her. The city felt different on foot, more immediate and dangerous. She stuck to shadows, using the skills Cassian had taught her. Bitter irony. The basilica's spire grew larger as she approached, its familiar shape both comfort and warning. At 10:52 p.m., she slipped through the side door into the chapel. Candles flickered in red glass holders, casting wavering shadows. The Black Madonna watched from above, her expression unreadable. Imani's footsteps echoed on the marble as she moved toward the altar. The rosary around her neck, the one she'd kept from cataloging donations, felt heavy. She reached for it, seeking comfort in the familiar beads. Movement whispered in the shadows. Before she could turn, gloved hands clamped over her mouth, iron strong and smelling of leather. She tried to scream, to fight, but more hands grabbed her arms. The rosary snapped, beads scattering across the floor like tears. One rolled beneath the nearest pew, catching the candlelight before disappearing into darkness. Kirill's men emerged from the gloom, like smoke becoming solid, their faces shadowed under dark caps. The hand over her mouth pressed harder as she struggled, muffling any sound that might have echoed through the sacred space. The Black Madonna watched from above, candlelight making her expression shift between sorrow and judgment as Imani's arms were pulled behind her back. The beads of her broken rosary lay scattered across the marble floor, glinting like drops of blood in the dim light. Her last thought before they dragged her deeper into the shadows was of Cassian finding her note. She'd run from the man she feared would betray her, straight into the arms of those who'd been hunting her all along. The basilica stood silent, its ancient stones holding countless secrets. Now they would hold one more, as the side chapel swallowed Imani into darkness at 10:52 p.m., the broken rosary the only sign she'd been there at all. At 10:53 p.m., a needle slid into Imani's neck. The sedative worked fast, turning her limbs to lead as Kirill's men carried her through the basilica's service exit. Her head lolled against leather seats as they loaded her into a waiting van. "Signal's good," one man muttered, adjusting a small camera mounted to the dashboard. "Broadcasting in 3, 2... The van lurched forward, city lights blurring past tinted windows. Through the chemical haze, Imani caught fragments of their conversation. Something about viewer counts and encrypted channels. They were making a show of this. She was going to be their theater. Back at the warehouse, Cassian returned to find the car empty, except for a single piece of paper. His fingers tightened on the note, crushing the words, "I won't be currency," into creases. His phone vibrated. Alessio. "Boss, Kirill's broadcast just pinged. They've got her." The world contracted to a knife point. Cassian's next breath came out like steel on stone. "Stream location?" "The crypt. They're advertising midnight, but they'll start earlier. Already have 300 viewers." Cassian's mind flashed to the monastery ruins blueprints he'd memorized years ago. Not just the visible structure, but the web of tunnels beneath. He'd studied them obsessively after claiming the territory, the way he studied every tactical advantage. Now those mental maps felt like prophecy. Get Valerio, he ordered. Only him. Pull every soldier he vouches for personally. We move in 15 minutes. While Alessio made calls, Cassian retrieved a waterproof bag containing extra clips and carbon fiber knives. The old sewer system would be their way in, cold, tight, and camera blind. Perfect. The sedative wore off gradually, leaving Imani with a cottony mouth and swimming vision. Stone walls came into focus. The crypt. Medieval arches disappeared into darkness above. The chair they'd tied her to was iron, probably once used for meditation. Now it held her fast with modern zip ties. Professional camera equipment formed a half circle around her. Red lights blinked, broadcasting her captivity to hundreds of hungry screens. The air smelled of mold and ancient death. Footsteps echoed on stone. Salvatore emerged from the shadows, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled at the cuffs. He adjusted his tie before stepping into frame. Comfortable, Ms. Cole? His smile was thin and cruel. You're about to help us send a very important message. Where's Kirill? Her voice came out rougher than intended. En route. But I wanted a moment first to explain. He paced in front of the cameras. You see, loyalty is such a fluid thing. Cassian never understood that. He thought fear and tradition were enough to hold power. But real power comes from adaptation. Understanding clicked like a bullet chambering. You're not taking his place. You're giving it away. Trading it, Salvatore corrected. For better roots, better protection. Kirill offers a stronger future. Sometimes the wisest move is knowing when to kneel. Through stone and earth, Cassian led his team through flooding service tunnels. The water reached their waists, cold enough to burn. They moved in absolute silence, knives taped flat against their forearms to avoid any metallic sounds that might carry to the cameras above. Valerio took point, using hand signals to mark their progress. 3 other men followed, all combat tested, all personally loyal. They'd stripped down to black thermals and face paint, movement smooth as sharks through dark water. The tunnel curved north, matching the blueprint in Cassian's head. 10 meters to the access grate. 8, 6. The water level dropped slightly, letting them move faster. Above, Imani tracked the changing viewership numbers displayed on a monitor just visible past the cameras. 400 now. 5. The audience grew as midnight approached. She tested her bonds carefully, looking for weak points while keeping her face neutral. Salvatore was still talking, painting himself as the practical visionary. When Kirill arrives, we'll start the real show. A little demonstration of changing loyalties. Nothing personal, my dear. You're simply the most effective prop. Cassian will kill you for this, she said quietly. Salvatore laughed. Cassian isn't coming. By now he's probably found your note and assumed you ran. That's the problem with men like him. They think everyone operates on their rigid code of honor. They never expect simple betrayal. In the flooded tunnel, Cassian checked his watch. 11:39 p.m. 21 minutes until midnight's toll would mask their breach. He could hear muffled voices through the stone above. Salvatore's theatrical monologue, perfect for covering any small sounds they might make. The team pressed against the tunnel wall, conserving body heat in the frigid water. Valerio's hand signal confirmed the access point was directly overhead. They waited in Predator's stillness, knives ready, timing each breath. Cassian's thoughts stayed razor-focused on the task. Breach on the bell toll. Take the cameras first, then the guards. No guns, no mercy. But beneath that tactical precision, deeper than the killing cold, his heart beat out a singular truth. He would tear this place apart, stone by stone, to reach her. The crypt's ancient air pressed down. Like a tomb lid, camera lights cast stark shadows on medieval walls that had seen centuries of violence. Soon they would see more. Midnight approached with the weight of judgment, while beneath the stone floor 4 men waited in freezing water, armed with blades and fury, counting down the minutes until the bells would toll. The basilica bells began their midnight toll as Kirill pressed cold steel against Imani's temple. The live stream counter ticked past 700 viewers. Watch closely, Kirill announced to the cameras. This is how power changes hands. Salvatore's smirk glowed in the artificial light. He adjusted his tie, ready for his close-up. Make it clean but memorable. The first bell rang. Through the haze of fear, Imani noticed a shadow shift behind the ancient altar, a darkness that moved like water. Second bell, a whisper of movement. Third bell. A single shot cracked through the crypt. The lights died. Emergency generators hummed to life, washing everything in blood-red glow. Shadows danced across medieval stonework as chaos erupted in perfect silence. The first guard dropped without a sound, garrote wire glinting red. The second followed a heartbeat later. A third clutched his ribs, Cassian's blade buried to the hilt, mouth open in a soundless scream. Salvatore's fingers knotted in Imani's hair, yanking her head back. "Stay in frame!" he hissed, dragging her toward the main camera. Imani didn't hesitate. She swung her bound wrists up and back, catching Salvatore's knee at precisely the right angle. He stumbled, grip loosening just enough. Cassian materialized from the shadows like death itself. His knife flashed, severing her restraints. His breath was warm against her ear as he steadied her. "You breathe, I do the killing." Kirill bolted for the catacomb corridor, footsteps echoing off ancient stone. Cassian moved with lethal grace, pausing only to crush the live stream equipment under his boot. The feed died mid-frame. The chase led beneath carved archways where centuries of the devout had walked. Kirill fired blindly over his shoulder, bullets sparking off stone. Cassian didn't flinch. He closed the distance with predatory focus, every movement measured and deadly. In the main crypt, Imani's hands shook, but her mind stayed sharp. She pulled the thurible chain from her pocket, the one she'd kept as a reminder of that first night when she'd chosen to save rather than run. Now it would serve a different purpose. Salvatore was struggling to his feet, gun raised toward Cassian's exposed back. The chain whipped out, wrapping around his ankle. Imani yanked hard. He crashed down, weapon skittering across centuries-old flagstones. Cassian spun at the sound, took in the scene in an instant, and ended the betrayer with mechanical efficiency. No ceremony, no last words, just the final payment for treachery. In the corridor, Kirill's desperate flight ended beneath a Gothic arch. Cassian's attack was brutally precise, a fighter's. Economy of motion, meeting absolute intent. The rival boss crumpled, another king fallen. The violence settled like dust. Emergency lights cast crimson shadows across ancient walls that had seen countless deaths, but never quite like this. Valerio and his team moved with practiced speed, setting charges to erase all evidence of the illegal studio. Imani's legs finally gave out, delayed shock setting in. Before she could fall, Cassian was there. He lifted her into his arms as naturally as breathing, cradling her against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath Kevlar and thermal gear. They moved through flooded tunnels, water sloshing against stone. The team maintained silence even in victory, professionals to the core. Cassian's grip never wavered despite the treacherous footing. The tunnel air grew fresher as they neared the exit. Behind them, centuries of sacred stone prepared to swallow modern sins. Ahead, the night wind carried salt and freedom. Imani pressed her face into Cassian's neck, breathing in gunpowder and man and survival. His arms tightened fractionally. In the distance, waves crashed against the shore, nature's own midnight bells marking the end of one existence and the beginning of another. The time on Valerio's watch glowed. 12:21 a.m. In less than 25 minutes, they'd rewritten the balance of power. Empires had fallen, kings had died. And in the aftermath, a woman who'd once hidden behind library stacks now rested in the arms of a man who killed for business but bled for love. They emerged from the tunnel into star-scattered darkness. The sea roared its ancient song. Behind them, buried in stone and shadow, lay the proof that even the most carefully laid betrayals could shatter against the simple truth of two hearts choosing to trust. Valerio's men disappeared into waiting vehicles, ghosts returning to shadow. The charges would detonate soon, erasing every trace of cameras and carnage. The crypt would keep its new secrets, as it had kept centuries of others. The wind off the water was sharp with salt, carrying away the last traces of underground damp. Cassian's stride never faltered as he carried Imani toward the waiting car, each step taking them further from death's doorway and closer to whatever future they would forge together. The ocean's voice grew louder, drowning out memories' echoes of gunfire and breaking bones. Nature's cleansing rhythm washed over them, wave after wave, like a baptism, like absolution, like the turning of a page. Salt mist clung to their eyelashes as they stood on the cliffs above the monastery ruins at 12:45 a.m. The explosion had been contained, surgical, leaving only a whisper of smoke curling up through ancient stone. Alessio kept the car steady on the coastal road, his usual sharp humor subdued by the weight of what they'd survived. The villa appeared through fog like a ghost, all white stone and glass, perched above churning waves. Valerio's men maintained a protective ring, their movements precise and professional. Inside, warm light spilled across polished floors that had never seen blood. The doctor, a discreet woman with steady hands, examined Imani thoroughly. She checked for concussion signs, tested reflexes, and drew blood to screen for lingering sedatives. Minor bruising, no lasting damage, she concluded, packing her bag. Rest and hydration. She left as quietly as she'd arrived, another shadow in Valerio's careful machine. Cassian hadn't moved from the doorway during the exam, his presence both guard and penance. When they were alone, he spoke with raw honesty. I leaked the trade deal to smoke them out, he admitted, shoulders tight. A false trail to draw Salvatore and Kirill into the open. I meant to tell you once we were secure, but there was no time between the warrant and... He stopped, jaw working. I broke your trust. There's no excuse that makes that right. Imani sat wrapped in a cashmere blanket on the terrace, watching moonlight fracture on dark water. The night air carried healing salt, washing away the crypt's musty darkness. She weighed his words against actions, the precision of his rescue, the gentleness of his hands cutting her free, the way he'd carried her through flooded tunnels as if she were precious cargo. You should have told me, she said finally. I'm not a chess piece to be moved in secret. No, he agreed. You're the queen who changed the whole game. She turned to study him, this dangerous man who killed without hesitation, but waited for her consent in all things. Fear no longer clouded her judgment. She chose with clear eyes and full awareness of both his darkness and his light. Come here, she said softly. He moved like a man approaching an altar, each step measured. When she reached for him, he caught her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. A benediction, a promise. Their first kiss was gentle, exploratory. The second burned hotter. By the third, they were breathing each other's air, hands learning new territories. Cassian checked in constantly. Is this okay? Tell me if you want to stop. His dominance carefully contained within the boundaries she set. They made their way to the master suite, where moonlight painted silver stripes across crisp sheets. Cassian worshipped her body with reverent hands and careful mouth, building pleasure slowly. Each touch asked permission, each moan was freely given. When he finally pushed inside her, it was with aching tenderness that made her gasp. Their lovemaking was a conversation of breath and touch, his strength held in check, her trust freely offered. He watched her face for any sign of discomfort, adjusted his pace to match her needs. When she shattered around him, crying out his name, he followed with a groan muffled against her shoulder. Afterward, he cleaned them both with warm cloths, wrapped her in fresh blankets, brought water and fruit. His care was evident in every small gesture, the way he tucked her against his side, how he kept one hand stroking gently through her hair. The night settled around them like a protective cloak. Waves crashed rhythmically against the cliffs below, nature's lullaby. In this peaceful bubble, the violence of earlier seemed distant, though its echoes would always live in their shared history. Valerio appeared silently at 5:45 a.m., ghost quiet as always. He delivered his update from the doorway, professional to the core. Kirill's inner circle is fracturing, he reported. Fighting over scraps already. The trafficking pipeline through the charity front is vulnerable. If we move fast, we can burn it completely. Cassian nodded once, his free hand never stopping its gentle motion in Imani's hair. Coordinate with Alessio. I want plans on my desk by noon. Valerio disappeared as smoothly as he'd arrived, leaving them alone in the growing dawn. Imani dozed against Cassian's chest, her breathing deep and even. He kept watch as the sky lightened, one arm curved protectively around her shoulders. The first rays of sun spilled across the water at 6:02 a.m., turning the waves to molten gold. For these precious moments, there was only peace, the warmth of skin on skin, the steady thud of hearts beating in sync, the promise of a future they would build together. The ocean breeze carried away the last traces of gunpowder and fear, replacing them with salt air and possibility. Cassian pressed a kiss to Imani's temple, gentle enough not to wake her. She made a small sound and burrowed closer, trusting even in sleep. Outside their window, seabirds wheeled and called, celebrating another morning's arrival. The light grew stronger, chasing shadows from corners, illuminating the safe harbor they'd found in each other. Morning sun glinted off harbor waves as their teams moved into position. At exactly 11 a.m., Valerio's crew breached the charity's back office with surgical precision. No shots fired, just the quiet click of picks and the soft whir of devices cloning hard drives. Inside, staff froze at their desks as Valerio's men secured servers and paper trails. Across town, Alessio escorted Detective Santos, a task force contact who understood the value of strategic blindness, toward an anonymous tip. The evidence would appear naturally discovered. Shipping manifests, wire transfers, and damning surveillance photos. Cassian handled the muscle personally. In a private dock office with sound-dampening walls, he delivered his message to 3 route captains. Their faces went slack with fear as he detailed exactly how bodies disappear in deep water. His voice never rose above a conversational tone, which made the threat more chilling. "The trade ends today," he said, sliding crime scene photos across the desk. "This is what happens to anyone who tries to rebuild it. Choose." They chose life. Smart men. Meanwhile, Imani worked her own kind of magic in a makeshift command center. Her fingers flew across keyboards as she connected digital dots between shell companies and donation records. Years of archival research had honed her pattern recognition skills. She tracked money through dozens of false fronts, building an evidence chain even rookie investigators could follow. "Here," she said, highlighting a sequence of transfers. "Every Tuesday after choir practice, like clockwork. They weren't even trying to hide it well." By 2 p.m., raids started rolling across the waterfront. Police boats cut through Harbor Chop while tactical teams secured warehouses. Local news crews caught enough action for headlines without getting close enough for details. Perfect. Cassian watched it unfold from their secured position, one hand resting on Imani's shoulder. She'd changed everything, not just by surviving that first night, but by showing him a different kind of strength, one that didn't require blood. As evening settled over the city, they drove to the basilica. Workers had replaced the broken stained glass. The space smelled of beeswax and incense instead of gunpowder. Cassian moved differently here, some of his predatory grace softening into something more contemplative. Candle flames danced in red glass holders, casting warm light across ancient stone. Cassian knelt before the Black Madonna, not seeking absolution, but offering thanks. The rosary in his hands, the one he'd worn that first night, caught the light as he laid it reverently at the icon's feet. Imani lit a votive candle, watching the flame catch and steady. The Madonna's dark face seemed to hold ancient wisdom in its carved curves. She understood now why people had sought comfort here for centuries. In a private chamber off the main sanctuary, Cassian gathered his inner circle. Valerio stood with perfect stillness as Cassian outlined the syndicate's new structure. The bloodiest operations would be dismantled. They would keep only what protected their own: legitimate businesses, strategic alliances, defensive capabilities. "The old ways die tonight," Cassian said. His tone left no room for debate. Later, at their villa, overlooking the coast, sea air carried away the last traces of violence. Moonlight painted silver paths across wooden floors, the same room where Cassian had once maintained an armed vigil. Now he approached Imani with something that glinted in his palm. The ring was elegant but understated, a single perfect diamond in a platinum setting that wouldn't catch on archive gloves. He slid it onto her finger with hands that had dealt death, but never wavered in gentleness with her. "The weapon is for the world," he said softly. "Never for you. Never." She touched his face, feeling the contrast between smooth skin and stubbled jaw. "I know." They moved to the balcony where waves crashed against cliffs below. The sound held power and peace together, like their love. Cassian pulled her onto his lap, strong arms creating a safe harbor. "Stay still," he murmured against her hair, echoing that first night. "Don't scream. I'll handle the monsters. You just live." Imani laughed softly, choosing joy after darkness. They discussed Monday's meeting with her department chair, a carefully crafted story about a family medical emergency requiring immediate travel. Her thesis drafts would transfer to a secure server, maintaining academic momentum while protecting sensitive data. They mapped out each detail, as thorough in planning peace as they had been in war. Cassian's fingers traced idle patterns on her skin as they talked through logistics, new encryption protocols for her research, rotating security teams that would blend with campus life, safe routes between archives and home. "The Madonna will still need cataloging," Imani mused. "All those donation records spanning centuries." "Now they'll be clean," Cassian said. "A true sanctuary again." She leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. They had fought their way here, through gunfire and betrayal, through fear and fury, to find something worth protecting, something worth changing for. The night wrapped around them like a blanket as they continued plotting their careful transition. Every loose end would be secured, every story aligned, every detail managed. They had learned the hard way that survival lived in the details, but now they planned for life instead of death. for mornings in sunlit archives and evenings by the sea, for a future built on choice rather than coercion. The monsters would never fully disappear, but they would face them together, combining his strength with her wisdom,